Part 2, Dragons in Decline. However, this is where the good times would stop for St George. A 5-game skid would delve the club into more drama, as well as slipping down the ladder at a ferocious pace. It all started with a familiar foe returning to the hallowed turf of Kogarah Oval, the Brisbane Broncos. Saints fans don't have to have great memories to recall the pain and anguish that we have gone through at the hands of the boys from up north. Grand final defeats in 1992 and 1993, Alfie Langer singing St George Can't Play, as well as being the club that had lured Gordon Tallis away from his contract with St George during 1996. The defeat in round 6 wasn't nearly as bad as those defeats in the early 1990s. Nonetheless, it started a slide that threatened to derail the Saints in 1996. In front of a solid crowd of 13,000, the Dragons held it with Brisbane for most of the first half before the class of the Broncos came out in a 22-4 win.
The Red and White's revival attracted another big Kogarah crowd, while would-be Bronco and former Dragon Gordon Tallis sat on the sidelines as spirited St George kept Brisbane at bay before falling for Kevin Walters' dummy. But Walters' fake pass paled when compared to Jason Donnelly's dummy act. Attempting to field Alan Langer's kick, the Saints winger committed a cardinal sin.
Donnelly's taken all day. It's a try to Darren Smith.
In the second half, Adrian Brunker's pace put the home team on the board, but Saints' outside defence began to look brittle. Sailors' try inflicted further wounds and did nothing to stem the crowd flow, Langer and Walters completing the kill.
The little kick for himself. It's on for the Broncos. Langer to Kevin Walters.
The going got worse the following week, with the Dragons paired up with a stacked North Sydney side. The Bears, who had had preliminary final berths in 1991 and 1994, had also made the playoffs the season prior in 1995. The Peter Louis coached squad had assembled a young, aggressive and attacking football side. Halfback Jason Taylor pulled the strings in attack with his pinpoint kicking game and was a sharpshooter in the goal-kicking stakes. Alongside him was young Queensland centre Ben Ikin, who had superb vision and strength. Speedster Brett Dallas, who had made the move over from Canterbury, was a noted try scorer and match winner on the wing. Plus, there was the hardened experience in the forwards, with Origin representatives David Fairley, Gary Larson and Billy Moore, alongside their durable captain, Greg Florimo. On the afternoon of the 5th of May 1996, it all came together for the Shoremen, who dismantled a poor Dragons outfit 42-0. Buettner was a star with 3 tries, and the Bears' forward pack ran over the top of a shell-shocked St George side. The Saints were outclassed in every facet of the game, and there weren't too many positives that coach David Waite could take from the fixture.
North took to home turf against the Saints. Few would have anticipated the tale about to unfold. The Bears went on a scoring spree, 3 penalties, 3 tries. This the pick of the first half bunch.
On for Buettner. Here comes the double.
After the break, North's leading 24-0 took up where they left off. Soden the next to score.
Soden's over.
The Dragons simply failing to fire and contain the Bears' attack. Chasing a hat-trick, Buettner winning the race.
I think he's made it in time.
Another try and the Bears racing to one of their biggest ever wins over the Saints, 42-0.
Exhibition gallop, really.
This wouldn't be the last battle between these sides, however. The next chapter would be very different. Saints dusted themselves off for a quick turnaround in a Friday night blockbuster at Kogarah Oval against a Manly side that had set the bar in terms of consistency over recent seasons. Semi-finalists in 1994, they were the best team in the competition throughout 1995 with 20 wins from 22 games. A shock grand final defeat to Canterbury left them hungry for more success. 1996 hadn't disappointed so far through 7 games, with the Seagulls having won 6 of them to sit in 4th place. Dragons fans still had traumatic memories from 2 seasons prior, when an avalanche of points at Brookvale saw the Saints suffer their heaviest ever defeat 61-0 in 1994, and revenge was firmly on their minds. Too dissimilar to the North Sydney game, Manly had quality everywhere and outmatched the Dragons in almost every position. On a wet and windy Friday night in Kogarah, these foes did battle in a highly entertaining yet low-scoring fixture.
With State of Origin positions on the line, star-studded Manly were full of running early. A 2-point cushion via Shannon Neville.
Now he strikes it, it's on its way, and it's there.
Then extended to 6, Hill deep in the attack.
Hill, not held, and he gets it over the line.
The Sea Eagles dominated, their constant pressure forcing Saints' mistakes.
They had a hand on it.
The 32nd minute, St George clawed 2 back.
Hits the upright and bounces through.
Right on half-time, the Dragons should have hit the lead, but Mundine fumbled.
He didn't grasp the ball.
6-2 at half-time, Manly with all the possession, determined to push the envelope after the break.
No doubt about it. Forward.
St George turned around Manly's attacking ferocity in the second half, unlucky not to level again.
Adrian Frank, I don't want that one.
At the other end, the Sea Eagles also missed a chance. Kosef pinned for a push in the back.
No, he's given the penalty.
Seconds before full-time, St George hammered the line again. Coyne unfortunate.
1.5 on the clock, Coyne. He's lost it.
In the end, a scrappy, eventful win. Manly 6, St George 2. Man of the match, Nick Kosef, disappointed with his side's attack.
The matters got worse for Saints in the next round down at Wollongong against little brother Illawarra. Another slow start mixed with ball handling issues and a few questionable calls by referee Mick Lewis saw St George lose its 4th straight game by the tune of 18 points to 12. The side had looked well below its best in the poor 4-match losing streak, and things wouldn't be getting any easier anytime soon. Coach David Waite had done his best to change his team around. In the Illawarra match, Nick Zisti was given a shot on the wing and Adrian Brunker was in the centres. Jason Stevens played from the bench in an attempt to give the Red and Whites some impact, and young centre Jim Lenihan was also on the bench. Unfortunately for Waite and the Dragons, it didn't have any effect. The Dragons were void of all confidence and slipped further into the mire. After a positive start, they now sat in 13th place behind Illawarra and some 10 points behind ladder leaders Sydney City. The murmurs of the future of the club and players' commitment for 1996 were in full force.
Always tough at home, the Steelers were desperate to make it 3 in a row, and it was Brad Heppy who capitalised on some ordinary Saints defence.
This will be play on. Heppy.
An intercept try to Damien Smith just after half-time kept the Dragons in touch, but their defence kept coming up with new ways to make mistakes, Simon making the most of this blunder. A controversial try to David Walsh stretched it to 18-12.
Well, Walsh is offside, the number 10.
Scott Gourley added some respectability. Too late, though, for the struggling Saints. After a bright start, they've now lost 4 on the trot.
To make matters worse, 2 days later, on the 21st of May, Brisbane unveiled Dragons star 5'8" Anthony Mundine as their latest signing. On Mundine's 21st birthday and in front of a packed house of reporters, it was revealed that he would leave St George and play for Brisbane in 1997. In a bemusing decision, Mundine had only been signed as he had agreed to play centre for the Broncos. In what would be described by St George coach David Waite as a vulgar act, Mundine flew up to Brisbane without any representation and was surprised with a birthday cake from Gordon Tallis, still contracted to the Dragons at that time, who appeared via a side door.
A celebration of Anthony Mundine's 21st birthday and confirmation he'd leave the Dragons at the end of the season.
You know, it was a hard decision to come here, but I'm sure, you know, having the players around me and Coach Wayne, now I should hopefully do better with my career.
He's the first player since the Super League war to publicly announce a change of clubs mid-year.
I just want to just play good football for them, play the year out, you know, and just try and do well.
He began his senior representative career this year with the club, and we told his management we would match any offers that he received from rival clubs.
If Super League wins its federal court appeal, which starts Thursday, Mundine will be able to carry out his new obligations to Brisbane. If the ARL wins, Mundine will then have to take them to court because of this clause in his standard ARL contract. Clause 26 is designed to prevent contracted players negotiating with rival clubs during the season.
I think Anthony perhaps hasn't performed to his best over the last couple of weeks because he's been thinking about making a decision on what he should do and what he shouldn't do as far as his future is concerned. I believe that all the negotiations should be going on in October when the football's completed, and that's a problem the ARL are going to have to address.
The Dragons are already involved in a wrangle with Brisbane over Gordon Tallis, who also hopes to move to the Super League club.
Maybe some of their officials are using us to breach some of the anger that they have for some of their inabilities to attract and retain players.
I haven't got any problems with Shane Edwards or any of the Brisbane. I am disappointed that we are losing our top players, and I would like to think that, you know, our club isn't going to be sort of disregarded as a competition or a strong club in the future.
Dragons coach David Waite was less than impressed with the circus that went on that morning, parading Mundine without a manager in front of a packed house, as well as Gordon Tallis being revealed via a side door. He described it as one of the more vulgar acts he'd seen in his 15-plus years involved in rugby league coaching.
Yeah, and you've got to remember that Anthony Mundine was taken away from us on his birthday to Brisbane, and someone jumped out of a cake at him and all those lovely things that I rated the worst thing I'd ever seen in rugby league. The way that was done, to send a young player up there without his manager and to have Gordon Tallis sing happy birthday or something to him with the head coach sitting beside him, I thought was probably one of the most vulgar things I'd seen in football in the middle of a season. But it was also probably the greatest learning curve for Anthony in his football career.
It was no surprise that the Dragons' downturn in form and that of Mundine's had coincided with one another. Dragons officials were none too pleased as they saw chalked apart and also had to contend with the loss of second rower Scott Gourley to Sydney City. Two key players had signed elsewhere for 1997. How would it affect them over the course of 1996? Coach Waite was particularly furious with the way Brisbane had conducted itself in the proposal for Mundine, labelling the Queensland club arrogant, and what they've done confirms what a lot of people think about that Brisbane club. The fact that St George weren't even given the opportunity to make an offer to the exciting youngster irked several staff and players at Cogra. In much better news, young forwards Lance Thompson and Luke Felsh signed on for the next 2 seasons to soften the blow for the Saints. Thompson became the richest 18-year-old with his new deal, and it was a just reward for his hard work and skillful performances. Felsh had been a quiet achiever in 1996 and had started the season in reserve grade, but had impressed the Saints coaching staff with some strong displays in the middle of the Dragons pack. Up next was a battle with perennial underachievers Parramatta. Since the heady days of the 1980s, Parramatta had suffered a severe decline. Gone were the superstars such as Croning, Sterling, Growth and Kenny. Replacing them were toilers who had the heart, but not the skill that the Blue and Golds needed. In the 10 years since their last premiership, the Eels had rarely threatened to make the semi-finals and had had a disastrous season in 1995 with just 3 wins from 22 games. 1996 was turning out differently for Parramatta, however. Heading into the game against St George, they had nestled themselves into the top 8 on 10 competition points. Some would argue that their draw so far had been a soft one. Victories against the likes of North Queensland, South Queensland and South, plus a forfeit victory and round 1 against Penrith, held them in a lofty position despite having not played some of the competition frontrunners. Fullback had been a real issue for the Saints in recent weeks, with Chris Quinn's erratic form forcing David Waite's hand. Quinn's issue with the high ball had cost the Dragons points over the last few games, and in the midst of a 4-game slide, something had to change. Young fullback Dean Raper got the call up as the Saints looked to get their mojo back. Mark Bell also returned to the side after a 6-week layoff with a hand injury. The fact that the veteran was rushed back into the starting side shows that he is held in such high regard at the club. The round 10 match against the Eels would be the Dragons' first in 3 weeks due to the split rounds because of state of origin. One thing that wasn't soft, however, was some of the punches that were thrown in what became one of the most brutal rugby league games played in 1996.
There's some fisticuffs in back play. Nathan Brown is involved as Parramatta still work the ball forward, but McBlain has to bring a stop to play. Plenty of players getting involved. Not too many punches thrown, I should mention.
It was between Nathan Brown and Gary Freeman. Freeman looks like he may have been cut. The crowd definitely reacted.
Skips out a man with Goldthorpe and then over the back of Raper. Penalty has come for inside the 10. And again, there's some push and shove and some punches thrown.
Oh, yeah, the boys are into it. Plenty of fire in this game today. This is the 2nd or 3rd incident we've seen. And there was a great opportunity for St George to score there. Parramatta very short as the ball went wide through the St George hands, but It couldn't be handled. In the end, a penalty goes to the Saints side. They'll probably have a shot at goal.
Problems at all for Mabon. In the meantime, Parramatta with McCracken eyes upended there by Mundine. Mundine's going to be penalised, and it's on again. Hello, McCracken wants to go it with Mundine. Lefts and rights. They might come out equal on points, but I'm sure Parramatta will get the penalty here.
In a game marked by violent sin bins and many mistakes, St George made the first clean break of the game.
Out goes Bartlett. Bartlett could go all the way, will.
And really should have gone on with it, but a charge-down clearing kick was the beginning of the Dragons' woes.
This will be a try to the Eels. Away goes David Woods.
Anthony Mundine dropped the ball cold and allowed Parramatta a 12-8 half-time lead.
Gets the pass away, and Parramatta get the try.
Mundine made up for his pre-break blunder by setting up the try of the match for Nick Zisti.
Tries to position the man inside, he's done that.
But again, the Dragons snapped under pressure. Player of the game, Jason Smith, sealing it for Parramatta.
Parramatta will get another try.
The Eels, who started the game without stars Dimmock and Raper, lost Chris King with a broken jaw, but take the vital premiership points.
Unfortunately, it again spelt bad news for St George. The Dragons self-imploded with mistake after mistake. Even with Parramatta having to play with 12 men for up to 30 minutes due to 2 separate sin binnings, the Red V just couldn't get the job done. The loss turned out to be a turning point in the 1996 season, bizarrely enough, after the side was given a dressing down by coach David Waite post-game.
With it. So he said, we're not leaving. We went to trainers, done the after-game video, and he said, boys, so I can tell you now, we're not leaving here until we get this clear. So we're here for a few hours. And then it just clicked.
Had to give for the hard-working Dragons. Either their performances would continue to hold them back and kill any hopes of a semi-final place, or they would find some fire in the belly and turn around a horrendous run of form. It wouldn't be as simple as that, however. Despite returning to the familiar surrounds of Kogarah Oval, the Saints had to take on an undefeated Sydney City side that was in scintillating form. They had won 10 games straight and had been led by the brilliant Brad Fittler and ably assisted by Ivan Cleary, Darren Junee and Andrew Walker. The Roosters would be missing Fittler, Lamb and Singh due to representative duties, but they still boasted a very talented side, were warm favourites against an out-of-form Dragons outfit. An understandably small Kogarah crowd cheered on the Red V as they put in their best performance for more than 6 weeks. Superb ball control, a dominant forward display, and some silky skills from halves Jeff Hardy, who had been moved from the forwards into the 5/8 role to add some starch in defence, alongside Noel Goldthorpe, saw them lay on 3 tries as the Saints powered to an upset 24-8 win. Anthony Mundine, with his future sorted and playing in the centres, bagged a try. Raper had nabbed the fullback spot from veteran Chris Quinn in recent weeks, who had been relegated to a bench utility or reserve grade fullback. Having made the move over from Cronulla the season prior, Raper, who was no relation to the famous Dragon Johnny Raper, was taking his opportunities with both hands. He also gave the Dragons another dimension in attack with his running style and kick return meters made from the back. The Roosters were out of answers and ideas as the Dragons got their season back on track.
From the kick-off, a weakened Roosters still looked cocksure, but it was the Dragons who answered first, Dean Raper smashing shell-like defence. Ricketson's hit on Thompson cost the Roosters another 2 points. And when Mundine flashed over, St George sights were set on an upset.
Inside the 10! Oh, well, you wanted to see him in action!
The Roosters stayed in touch with a much-needed try to Woods, and 6 points was the difference at the break.
Did he score for the Roosters?
Chasing their 11th straight win, the Roosters hit a red and white wall, and for the first time this season, they couldn't climb back. When Campion cleaned up the chip, St George had ended a 5-game losing streak.
Campion has scored for the Dragons!
Any hopes of a Dragons win streak were dashed a week later, however, as Newcastle extracted revenge on the Saints for the loss earlier in the season. The Knights did it comfortably in the end, winning 23 points to 12 as the Dragons' slow start again came back to haunt them. Ill discipline also contributed, with the Red and Whites giving away 12 penalties in the 11-point loss that left the famous club in 13th place, 4 points outside the top 8 and all but out of the finals race just past the halfway mark of the season.
Last start, the Knights were humiliated by the Cowboys, but with their 4 Origin stars back, they quickly returned to the boil. The Dragons took some heavy hits. Noel Goldthorpe had a bad case of the wobblies.
And he's in Gagas.
And Andrew John's field goal and penalty put Newcastle in charge 9-0 at half-time. Quick hands and numbers out wide saw Newcastle move to 13-0. St George hit back with a soft try before Andrew John's solo effort sent Fatty into overdrive.
Oh, what a player, what a man, what a champion.
Down 19-6, the Dragons wouldn't give up, but in front of more than 21,000, Newcastle wrapped up the match 23-12.
The Dragons had their chance at revenge when they tackled the Cronulla Sharks in the second meeting between the pair in round 13. Fans packed into Kogarah Oval to see two sides do battle who had very contrasting seasons. The Dragons were barely clinging to life and had the heart monitors attached to their season. The Sharks, on the other hand, sat in 6th place on 16 points, comfortably in the playoff spots. With the forfeit in round 1, they had lost just 3 games since and had already disposed of an understrength Dragons side 24 points to 16 in round 2. In a seesawing battle, the Dragons fell 10 points behind early in the second half before tries to Mark Coyne and Mark Bell saw the Dragons leave Kogarah with a point after an enthralling 20-all draw.
The Dragons fired early, Mark Bell scoring in the opening 10 minutes. Dean Raper is no relation to Saints legend John Raper, but the former Cronulla junior is making a name for himself. Salutes to the crowd. Centre Paul Donaghy hit back for Cronulla, and before a crowd of 13,000, this derby also proved a hit amongst players. Bell getting neighbourly with Andrew Pearce. Paul Green crawled through Saints' defences just before half-time, and the Sharks went 10 ahead when Matt Rogers scored early in the second. Captain Mark Coyne started the home team's revival, and Saints' comeback received another boost when Nathan Long was sin-binned. Bell pouncing on Goldthorpe's bomb to bring about the deadlock.
Out there, Branca coming through. That's a try.
The Dragons at last had shown some fight and determination that their coach and fans had been looking for. But was it too late for them to make a dash for the finals? St George had been able to go on a phenomenal run at the back end of 1995 to make the finals, and a similar type run would be needed in 1996. There was enough quality in the side to trouble even the best teams, but as had been the question for the past few seasons, could St George do it consistently enough? Dragons half Noel Goldthorpe remembers the team getting together at this stage of the season, knowing that they had to go on a winning streak to have any chance of playing semi-final football.
And I think that's the attitude these guys had. Like, they didn't care. Like, there was no pressure. And I remember that season because we were about 10 weeks out. And, like, the boys are starting to talk, we need to make a run, boys. You know, we've got to make a run to get through these semis. And Jeff Hardy was very good for us at Saints. He was so good. He'd get the boys in together and sort of rally up the team, and then we'd all sit down and say, look, we got to start making a run, and we need to win this, and we need to win that, and we need to do this. And all the boys bought into it. And, we just got on a roll, as you said, and made our way through the semis into the grand final again.
With only 5 wins next to their name for 1996, the Dragons had to hit the ground running against a capable and challenging Sydney Tigers outfit in round 14 at Parramatta Stadium. The Tigers had dropped the Balmain from their name and adopted the name Sydney, as well as moving all of their home games to Parramatta from the start of the 1995 season as a way of attracting more support amongst the Super League war. It would end as a failed experiment at the end of the 1996 season, but at this stage of the season, they were 7th on the table with an unlikely final spot not looking so unlikely. Led by young fullback and New South Wales representative Tim Brasher, and with a hardened experience of Paul Sirenen along with Englishman Ellery Hanley, there were a group of core players there that could trouble the Saints. However, once the game started, it appeared as if nothing had changed at Dragons headquarters. The Tigers jumped out to a 14-0 lead midway through the first half as a shell-shocked Dragons side saw their season flash before their eyes. Somehow the Dragons pulled themselves off the floor to take the lead before the sending off of Tigers centre Mark Doreen in the second half opened the door for St George to storm home on the back of a hat-trick of tries to Mark Bell and a double to veteran winger Ricky Walford in a 30-19 win.
The Sydney Tigers had 2 tries on the board in quick time against St George and enjoyed a 14-0 lead. But the Dragons turned up the heat and stormed back. Mike Doreen was sent off, leaving the Tigers a man down for most of the second half. Mark Bell's second of 3 tries put the Dragons 18-16 in front. And while the Tigers grabbed the lead again, St George put it beyond doubt with a barnstorming finish to win 30-19.
Bell had always had a nose for the try line, but his anticipation on this particular afternoon against the Tigers was top-notch. Bell would have a field day when the final series came along, but his form in the regular season with his dependability and versatility were invaluable to the St George Dragons. A product of the Canberra system, Bell had been well travelled. He'd spent time at the Raiders, Wests and Penrith before linking up with St George in 1995. He had over 100 games worth of first-grade experience, and that was invaluable through this run, mixed in with the youth and vigour of the young members of the side. His 3 tries on that cool afternoon in Parramatta had kept the Dragons' season alive. Just. The Dragons' turn of fortunes continued the following week back at Kogarah against fellow wannabe challengers, the Penrith Panthers. The good news had started in the lead-up to the game, where it was announced that St George had agreed a deal with St George Bank as their sleeve sponsor for the remainder of 1996. The 4-year deal sees Happy the Dragon, the bank's mascot, become the official mascot of the Red V. A huge financial boost for the Dragons as their charge to the final gained some momentum. St George's slick attack and ball movement was far too strong for Penrith as Anthony Mundine rediscovered the Midas touch with 2 tries, along with winger Adrian Brunker, who also bagged a double. When it was all said and done, Saints had won back-to-back games for the first time since round 5 with a resounding 36-10 drubbing of Penrith to keep the red and white loyalists happy for another week.
It was a messy afternoon for the Panthers and a busy one for the Dragons. Lance Thompson got things rolling. He scored the first of 6 St George tries. Anthony Mundine dummied and stepped his way through for 2 of his own. St George 36-10 winners.
All of a sudden, the whispers of a run into the finals were getting ever so louder. With the decisive matchup against fellow semi-final aspirants West on the horizon, the Dragons had a sniff. Although some of that pre-match confidence evaporated when Anthony Mundine was ruled out with the flu. The Dragons had reason to celebrate pre-game as they welcomed former Dragons greats to honour the 75th anniversary of the football club. Billy Smith, Graham Langlands and Johnny Raper were some of the names in the house. Could they inspire another Saints win? St George was able to lean upon the experience of veteran Jeff Hardy, who had played everywhere for the Saints in 1996. 5'8", hooker, prop and back row. It didn't seem to faze the stocky and jovial Hardy. He, like many others, were happy to be in the team each week and helping St George keep its season alive. Hardy steered the red and whites around the field like a pro, while Noel Goldthorpe pulled the strings in attack. But it was the performances of the forwards, Barnhill, Campion and Bartram, that laid the platform for the win. Post-match, those former Dragons legends joined in with the current players for a stirring rendition of When the Saints Go Marching In, led by Jeff Hardy and Norm Proven.
Saints ran on minus Anthony Mundine, a late withdrawal due to injury. Wests were forced to do without Steve Georgalis for 10 minutes, his absence allowing David Barnhill to give Saints a 10-2 lead. When Colin Ward charged straight up the middle, Saints seemed home, but Wests hit back with the try of the match.
Willis under the post, the Magpies.
Willis went from hero to villain when he became the Magpies' second sin binning, and this time the overlap put Saints beyond reach.
Now that is the ball game.
One of the big reasons for the Dragons' uptick in form had been that of middle forward Kevin Campion. Signed from the Gold Coast at the beginning of 1996, the durable forward had been a star performer in a Dragons pack that had big names in Scott Gourley, Jason Stevens, David Barnhill and Jeff Hardy. Campion's no-frills attitude and brutal defence in the middle of the park was one of the major reasons Saints' defence had improved so drastically in recent weeks. Through countless video sessions, there was nothing that could be dug up on Campion. No missed tackles, no penalties, no errors. He was fast becoming the best defensive player at the club. Nicknamed Sugarbags in his days at Gold Coast due to the amount of stitches he got, Campion has settled into life at St George and was developing into a cult figure at Saints. No more Sugarbags. It was Campion the champion whenever the uncompromising back rower laid out hits to the opposition at Cogra. The grand announcers had fun, bellowing out that one. Despite 3 wins on the bounce, St George was still under pressure heading into their Saturday night showdown with traditional rivals South Sydney at the Sydney Football Stadium in round 17. The Dragons were still without Anthony Mundine, who had struggled in the last fortnight with a virus. In another change for the Red V, young winger Nick Zisti had gained a recall at the expense of veteran back Mark Bell. Zisti's recall wasn't even the best news of the week for the towering wing three-quarter. 4 tries later, he was the talk of the town at Cogra.
A late call-up for Nick Zisti paid handsome dividends for the St George winger.
Easy try, Zisti in the corner.
He scored 4 tries in the 32-12 win over Souths on the soggy football stadium to keep the Dragons in the thick of top 8 contention.
The red-hot Dragons made it 5 wins in a row as they ploughed through the Gold Coast Chargers at Carrara by 22 points to 10. The win moved the Dragons into the top 8. It was 2 former Gold Coast products, Kevin Campion, who won man of the match, and outside back Adrian Brunker, who bagged a double in the 5-1 win that led the way. Strong performances up front from another Gold Coast boy, Colin Ward, as well as youngsters Lance Thompson and veteran David Barnhill, laying the platform for the Dragons' backs to run riot, with Anthony Mundine again featuring in a lot the Dragons did offensively. It was a fun environment to be playing in and to be a part of, as the Dragons' winning streak continued.
It was fantastic, you know, and winning's contagious, and winning just changes the vibe. You know, go to any club after a loss and it's pretty down. When you get on a winning roll, you just grow into confidence, and you expect to win, and you learn how to win. And it's the same as losing. It's very similar. You lose, and it's hard to get back on that winning trot again. And we'd got on a winning trot. I think we won 10 in a row in that 96 run, and we were on fire. And you know, young Anthony Mundine was just coming into his own, and you need that. You need someone to spring from the youngsters that no one really planned about, and he was just coming good. You know, obviously we needed him back, and he'd come back and delivered. And he loved being at the Dragons. Being a Dragons junior himself, and Brownie come back and was going great, and you know, and Coyne and it was just a really good vibe in the club. Everyone got on great, and you know, we had Troy Stone and you know, no superstars, but just good, hard working players.
The win set up a Friday night blockbuster against the Auckland Warriors the following week, with the winner almost guaranteed a finals place. In further good news, the Dragons locked up head coach David Waite for a further 2 years until the end of the 1998 season. Waite, who had signed a 2-year deal, signed on for a further season in what has been described as a Houdini act, with what he's been able to do at Saints this season. Dragons fans weren't the only ones calling for him to be awarded the Coach of the Year. It was vintage St George in round 19 against the visiting Auckland Warriors. The Dragons' attacking blitzkrieg saw it score 3 tries in the first 19 minutes to lead 16-0. The game was as good as over. Noel Goldthorpe played arguably his best game in the 1996 season, bombing the Warriors' back 3 mercilessly. His passing was top-notch and adds a great foil to the flamboyant Anthony Mundine. After a slow start, the Dragons' little general is firing at the right time of the year. However, the win did come at a cost, with Anthony Mundine limping off with knee ligament damage and Mark Coyne cracking his thumb. Mundine is expected to miss just the 1 game, while Coyne is out until the start of the semi-finals.
In the race for the final, St George had a head start thanks to a well-placed kick from Noel Goldthorpe. Mark Bell crossing the line.
Bell goes in to score!
Another Goldthorpe kick also paid dividends.
He puts a stabbing, grubbing kick through and stacks on the mill and given a try.
And not long afterwards, Goldthorpe again had the ball on a string, the Dragons clinching their 3rd try.
And there's the kick again and another try.
Bad handling errors meant Auckland's scoring chances went begging, but Saints made no such mistakes.
Jeff Hardy offloading to Nathan Brown.
And Brown scores for St George.
Goldthorpe's drop goal added insult to injury. St George leading 23 points to 0 at the break.
The hand goes up, there's a further point.
The Dragons were still firing in the second half. Anthony Mundine finishing off some great team play.
Gets a running forward, then back, and Goldthorpe is there, and Mundine will score.
Minutes later, Mundine put in a brilliant individual effort.
They'll have to hurry, they're not going to get him. Mundine!
It wasn't till the 76th minute that Auckland finally bothered the scorer, but all too little and much too late.
And Goodenbeil scores.
For the second straight season, the Dragons had dismantled a talented Warriors side with destructive attacking play and pinpoint kicking. The win all but ended the New Zealanders' hopes of finals football in 1996, and in the meantime, boosted the Dragons' hopes as well as giving it much-needed points in the points differential column. St George travelled to Lang Park the following week against the struggling South Queensland Crushers. With no Anthony Mundine or Mark Coyne, the Dragons had to delve into their depth in what was a tight tussle north of the border.
South Queensland's players are yet to be paid this season, and the Crushers coughed up a free try for St George's Adrian Brunker. The home team sinking further into debt when Noel Goldthorpe's kick provided Troy Stone with a 4-point bonus.
Norton, it comes loose for Stone.
Craig Teevan's been the Crushers' best this year, but a knee injury may have ended his season. Hot heads earned Paul Tideman and Jim Lenihan 10 minutes to cool off. Down to 12 a team, Jason Wendt reduced the deficit to 8 points, but Nathan Brown caught the Crushers napping, Saints scoring their 7th win in a row.
The injury bug struck again, however. After losing Anthony Mundine and Mark Coyne to injuries in the win against the Warriors, Saints lost talented back rower Scott Gourley to a knee injury in his first game back from a neck injury in the reserve grade victory over the Crushers. With 7 straight wins, the Dragons had a sniff, unbelievably, of a top 4 finish. However, that evaporated with a disappointing and lacklustre performance at home against the lowly placed North Queensland Cowboys.
Cowboys outfit looked anything but easy beats as they raced to a 16-0 lead against Premiership hopeful St George. Replacement Willie Gibson crossed twice as the locals were left stunned by the early onslaught. A Dragons fight back saw the home side hit the lead in the second half, but in a major upset, the Cowboys recorded only their 6th win for the season.
It may yet prove to fire up the Dragons, or will it derail the form team of the competition? This completes part 2 of the St George Dragons 1996 documentary here on the Red V podcast. Don't miss our 3rd and final instalment, which culminates in the Dragons' phenomenal run through the semi-finals and into that ARL Grand Final decider against the Manoranga Seagulls. Part 3 will be released soon here on the Red V podcast documentary series hosted by Jack Clifton.